Not often, but sometimes, especially in scripts of a certain age. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you, Eugene O'Neill.
Hey everybody, welcome back to No Script, an unscripted conversation about theater's best scripts. I'm Jacob Mann Christensen.
And I am Jackson Nikolai. Yeah, welcome back, everybody. We're getting to kind of an exciting moment in the podcast as we kind of wind down the way to another end of a season, the end of season 10.
That's right, season 10 is, it's a milestone in everything, and this has been a great season for a lot of reasons, for a lot of cool things that we have had happen. We had a great themed month. We got to talk about some cool scripts. Those things happen every season. And also coming up on our podcast is something that happens every season next week. And we're as Jackson said, we're getting right up to the end of the season. So this is a little later than we sometimes do it, but the guest episode kind of moves all around. So it's not that out of pattern,
It's true.
but it's like the second to last episode of the season is coming up. I don't know if you can believe that or not, but we're very near the end. And so next week is our special guest episode.
Yes, indeed. And it is my turn to have a conversation with a special guest. And this particular season, we're going to be welcoming Hannah Barker Nikolai onto the show.
Very special guest.
We're going to be welcoming Hannah Barker Nikolai onto the show, who I am married to. Excited to have that conversation. We're going to be talking about Frozen by Brian E. Lavery, and just excited for that conversation. Hannah's a poet, a theater artist, a writer, and a lot of this play leans into the work that she does, and I'm excited to kind of have that extra facet to get to talk about in on the No Script show, and about a really significant play for that as well.
Yeah, we love the guest episodes because they're just a chance to sort of hear somebody else talk about plays. While Jackson and I love to do it, it's just the two of us, and we'd go, we'd do about, 18 to 20 episodes a season, depending on how the weeks work out. And so that's a lot of episodes, man, to just hear us talk. So we break it up with one guest episode every season. I'm excited to hear Jackson and Hannah have a conversation. As Jackson said, and you may be skeptical because he is married to her, but I can say as someone not married to him, but she is a very capable, exciting poet, writer, theater artist. She will have some very great things to say about that play, I'm sure. I'm sure it'll be a fascinating conversation. It's a totally different dynamic. I think your mother-in-law has been on the show before because Karen taught theater for a number of years.
Yeah.
But I think the dynamic of someone that you're married to will be quite different.
Yeah, it'll be a new one for sure. Excited to kind of see how it all works. Hannah and I have done other podcasts before, but not about theater. So this will be a fun one to get to chat about. And get excited for that. But don't worry, Jacob will return. It's like the Avengers end credits. Jacob will return for the end of the season, the last episode of the season before we take our summer break.
That's right. We're nearly there, everybody. 2 more episodes in the season, and then we take our summer break, and we'll be back for season 11 sometime in the fall. We always hold beginnings and endings of the season very loosely because life throws a lot of curveballs at you,
It's
and
true.
we got to have some buffers built in. So we can't tell you exactly when we will be back, but it will be sometime in the late summer, early fall. No Script will be back. We'll keep announcing that in the coming episodes so nobody's caught off guard. But we still have 3 exciting episodes until then, if you include this one. And this one has only begun, and we are talking about one of those plays that is kind of the characteristic play for a type of play, right? We're talking about like the exemplar of this particular style. We're talking about the exemplar for this particular type of playwright. And there is nobody out there who does this better than Anna Deavere Smith. Her play Fires in the Mirror is, if you are a verbatim theater, if you're a social justice theater, if you are a kind of special devised sort of projects theater maker, thinker, interested in those kinds of things, you know Anna Deavere Smith. You probably revere Anna Deavere Smith for what she did for that community. She's an actor and a playwright, and these shows, all of her incredible series of verbatim shows, come out of her work both as an actor and a playwright. So although we'll discuss her as a playwright today, she acted these shows. She premiered these shows. The videos of her performing in Fires in the Mirror, I'll talk about in the context section, they were amazingly captured, which is a huge benefit to the theater community. Her performances in Fires in the Mirror are seminal performances for verbatim theater artists. I mean, this is the person who built the house. You know what I mean? And that as an actor and a playwright. And it's a great privilege to be at her play today.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, we're talking about Anna Deavere Smith for the second time on the podcast. House Arrest being the other time that we have talked about a play of hers. And yeah, just the way that verbatim theater, oral history, all that sort of really unique kind of. I'm going to talk about it in the episode, so I'm not going to say too much about it now, but the sort of like way that you can witness and attest to people's real life stories with theater is a really unique thing, and can do it kind of like with some generosity and also some critique. It's all of those features of verbatim theater are on full display in this script, and I'm excited to get to talk about it because it's a really important piece.
Yeah, and it's a piece. I mean, I'm stealing from myself here because I'm doing context, so no big deal. This play is like, it's back. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Like, it premiered in 1991, and it was what it is, which is an incredible, seminal piece of verbatim theater for the world. And everybody, I mean, if you follow this again at all, already know the play, you know Anna Deavere Smith. And then it's verbatim theater. So it's not like it's performed everywhere every day, right? We talked about Miss Julie and the Phantom of the Opera as the past two episodes. Like, this play's not those plays in terms of productions, and it's still very produced as a piece of verbatim theater, but it's not Miss Julie or Phantom of the Opera, but it's back. I mean, when we get to the context section, you'll see, like, in the past 5 years, it's like suddenly everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, the themes in it are still in conversation 30 some years after it being written. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense that it is back for those reasons. And so I'm excited to get to talk about it. We're already starting to ping pong and pinball and start to have some good conversation about it. Before we jump into the real meat of the conversation, though, I wanted to take just a second and say thank you to all of our patrons over at patreon.com/noscriptpodcast for being patrons of the show. We're coming along to the end of season 10, and it's been just so fun to get to kind of build this community, have these conversations, be a part of y'all's days whenever you listen to this particular podcast, and just get to continue to talk about some of theater's best scripts. If you're looking for a way to help out the show, be a part of the show, whether you're a first-time listener or a long-time listener, patreon.com/noscriptpodcast is an awesome way to do that. If you visit over there, you'll see a number of different tiers of membership, of patronship, and the lowest one being just $1, which we have committed to over 10 seasons. We have not changed that entry level, and at that entry level, you get access to a lot of cool stuff, like patron-only posts, early access to scripts that we're doing, a little bit of advanced plan of what it is that we're going to be doing on the show. We'll likely, over our break, still be posting occasionally over on Patreon, and so it's a great place to hang out, great place to both kind of be a part of the community of No Script in another way, and also help out the show enormously. We love getting to do the show. We love getting to have these conversations, and alas, it is not a free endeavor. And so the patrons make it happen. So if you're looking for a way to help out the show and be a part of the No Script community, head on over to patreon.com/noscriptpodcast, and we will see you over there.
And now back to the script.
Here we go.
Hey, all right. So we've already done a play by Anna Deavere Smith, as Jackson said. That play was House Arrest, a fascinating play about the sort of relationship between the presidency and the public, and the way in which the president's life is a public facing life, and what that does for leadership, for personality, but also for our perception of our leader, that they live their life in such a public way, that they are kind of a celebrity alongside being a political leader. And having these very serious jobs, that they also have to have this celebrity alongside of that. Anyway, a great, fascinating play. I love that it's so specific and so detailed and so interesting. Those things characterize everything Anna Deavere Smith does. This play, Fires in the Mirror, is in line with that sort of part of her career, the creation of these pieces of verbatim theater. She is, the person, maybe besides KJ Sanchez, together they are the people for conducting rich, rigorous interviews with people of all stripes. We're talking everyday folks who are not unnamed are in this play, and we're talking the Reverend Al Sharpton is in this play. Big time figures, and all up and down, and other playwrights. George C. Wolfe features in this play. And so conducting these rich, rigorous interviews, and then taking those interviews and putting together excerpts directly from the interviews. I'm just giving a basic overview of verbatim theater for those who aren't with us, and taking excerpts from those interviews, stitching them together into a Anna Deavere Smith performs them as a one-person show. You don't actually have to do that, but that's how she performs them. These excerpts from interviews, so they're real words from real people, and Anna Deavere Smith is, as an actor, incredible at the way in which she embodies those people. She does, it's almost impossible to describe the way in which she is able to put on real people, completely step into the way they speak, the way they think, the way their bodies work differently than her body, the way that their faces work differently than her face, the speech pattern. It's incredible. Again, this particular show was documented as a sort of like television movie for American Playhouse and that was in 93. The fact that they did that is, I said this in our little intro conversation, is a huge, amazing blessing for the theater. For us to have those performances from Anna Deavere Smith documented it's an unspeakable benefit. Maybe unspeakable is not right. You can't put a price on it. You can't quantify. There's no description that adequately describes how valuable having those documentations are. 20, 30, I guess, years later, thanks, American Playhouse. George C. Wolfe, interestingly, just a little tidbit, who features in the play. Again, he's a playwright, director, famous figure in American drama. He directed the show, the television movie in which he was a character. So that's, I don't know, kind of a fascinating, weird little thing to go on. Of course, that played on PBS. So that's just a little bit of kind of what it is. Jackson will describe the actual sort of events and what goes on to make it what it is. As with all of Anna Deavere Smith's stuff, it is an investigation of something real. So this is a real event. I'll let Jackson take on that part of it. This play premiered in 1991, which is the same year as the event. The event that Jackson will tell you about was in August. This play premiered in December. We're talking 5 months later, and thinking about like the amount of work that Anna Deavere Smith put in those 5 months to mount this. So that was George Wolfe's. Again, he's going to feature a bunch, I guess. He has this thing, or did, called the Festival of New Voices. That's where it premiered in December. Its actual technical world premiere was the next May in 92 at the New York Shakespeare Festival. Since then, it's been produced all over. We're talking places like the American Repertory Theater, the MacArthur Theater, Brown University, Stanford University, the Melbourne International Arts Festival. Weirdly, Australia does feature in the play because of the real event that happened. I guess we'll learn a little bit about that. Those were all sort of the classic productions of this show. A lot of universities do it, and they do it not as a one-person show, but as an ensemble show, because there's like 20 some odd people that their interviews make up the excerpts, you could cast 10 actors and they could each play 2 or 3 of them. And it's an incredible different kind of acting challenge to play real people. Talking the way they really talk instead of, the sort of character creation that we think makes up acting. I already talked about the television movie. I want to talk just briefly about the recent productions and then a couple of awards. This is not a total list, but just in the past 4 years. In 2019, there was an off-Broadway revival at the Signature Theater featuring Michael Benjamin Washington. His interviews about, he did it as the one-person thing, so he played all of the characters. His interviews about doing it, and Anna Deavere Smith being in the room to help them make it. I mean, he's of a different body than Anna Deavere Smith. I mean, he has a male body and she's a female body. So the way in which that changes production and performance for those two people, but also for him to sort of sit in the room with her. She who made the show, who wrote it and originally performed it, and now is just there as a consultant. I mean, she wasn't directing; she was just there. And he got to, I mean, it's just incredible. Listen to some of the interviews about it's amazing. 2021, during the pandemic, theatrical outfit in Atlanta produced a live stream production. To 2022 in Hartford, of course, the Long Wharf did it. 2022 in the summer of 2022, Theater J in DC did it. And there's a couple of other less known theaters that did it as well. I mean, it's back in some way, in part because the tensions in Crown Heights are not gone. And in fact, were inflamed recently by other stuff that's gone on. So that's part of it. This play received the Drama Desk Award for Outstanding One-Person Show. I don't know who else you could have given it to that year. I don't know, like, what else was going on in 93 in the world of one-person shows that there was, like, even a competition. It's like that. Right. Oh, yeah, that one's it. That's Outstanding One-Person Show, Anna Deavere Smith. Whatever she's doing, just give it to her. And then, of course, she also won it later for Twilight Los Angeles, which is probably her most famous play in this style, but not the one we're talking about today. She's a major figure. It's hard to capture the context of what this play, what her style, what her theatrical thinking did. In our first conversation about House Arrest, we talked a lot about her kind of idea of what theater is and how it's made. In fact, she often performs barefoot, why she does that. I don't know that we'll do those discussions today, just in an effort not to repeat. But all of that from last time is true here now as well.
Right. Yeah. So many cool things about how she performs and all the things. Excited to kind of jump into the conversation. I'm going to give you just a little bit of synopsis just to start us on the same, mostly the same spot. It's worth noting, I'm going to very briefly synopsize this play and the actual event that it is documenting. If you want to learn more about the event, read the play. The play does a great job about it. There's lots of great resources just within the play, like timelines and things like that. Both timelines for the scope of the play, and also my version of the script at least has timelines stretching after the premiere of the play into 1992 and 93. So definitely there's plenty of ways to avail yourselves of this information. But I'm going to do my best here to just give you a brief synopsis, first of all, of the event that happened, and then the way that the play approaches that event. The event that the play is concerned with is an event that happened in Crown Heights, Brooklyn on August 19th, 1991. What happened was there's two communities living very closely together in Crown Heights. A primarily black community made up of Black Americans, and also people of Caribbean descent are living in this community, and they're living very closely with a Hasidic Jewish community, the Lubavitcher community is how I'm going to pronounce it today. And there's been some ongoing tension between that group for a long time around protection in the community, the way each other interacts, the way that New York's police department interacts with the two different groups within that community. So there's, as this night begins, there's been some tension between them. On this particular night, a Grand Reb Mansham Schneerson is driving through the community. He is often escorted by a police escort because he is afraid for his life from another group. He's a religious leader of the Lubavitcher community. And as he's driving through here, his driver, Josef Lifsch, is driving quite quickly. He drives through a red light and swerves to avoid a car and kills a boy, Gavin Cato, and breaks his sister Angela's leg. On that, in the sort of aftermath of that, there's lots of things. The play talks about a lot of things, but there's kind of some chaos there as people rush to the scene from the different neighborhoods. Ambulances arrive, and some of the ambulances are kind of a private ambulance from the Hasidic Jewish community there, who rush off, and the driver and the one in the car, and eventually the boy Gavin Cato is pronounced dead. On that same night, a couple in another neighborhood, Yankel Rosenbaum, a doctor who is from Australia, who is in Crown Heights and studying at this kind of like Crown Heights has become this kind of center for this particular Hasidic Jewish community. He is in town, he's studying, and on that night he is stabbed and later dies of his stab wounds about 5 blocks away from the car accident. A group of 10 black folks who someone stabs him to death in that group, and he's later pronounced dead at a hospital. And the person who is kind of brought in to face the court as a result of that murder is Limerick Nelson Jr., who later on ends up being acquitted of that murder, and then the fallout of that, the various communities move and shake. The driver who ended up killing Gavin Cato leaves the country and leaves the country to Israel, and then there's various cries for justice from both sides towards the city as they try to figure out how to get justice for these 2 killings that happened on the same night. That's my brief summary of the actual event. There's a lot more. There's a lot more kind of aftermath and fallout of it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, the result of those 2 killings, which are connected, the killing of the fellow from Australia is a result of the anger the black community was experiencing at the accidental death of the 7-year-old young Cato. And the result of all that is days of rioting in Crown Heights. The communities against each other and against the police. And I mean, it's a major. The Crown Heights riots are a major moment in New York City history. And you know, Anna Deavere Smith, amazingly, like we talked about in the context, is able to capture them within 5 months as a production.
Yeah,
sort of just encapsulating this moment in a brilliant way.
Yeah, and she does that by a series of interviews in the play, that real verbatim interviews that she takes on the character of, and writes it as a one-woman show in this case, though Jacob already said that it's been done other ways. But yeah, embodies these different stories. These are all a part of her kind of broader set of plays on the road, A Search for American Character, and you get to see a bunch of American character in this play. As far as the structure of it goes, I'm going to really pick up the pace here, so we can get into some of the conversation around it. The way the play sets this up is through a number of these conversations presented in kind of bracketed chapters, sort of. Chapter isn't a word that is used in here, but there are sort of overarching themes in each of these groupings. There's identity, there's mirrors, there's hair. I'll briefly kind of synopsize just a little bit of what's happening there. Identity in this chapter. They're talking about how America is often upheaved in terms of how people identify with their identity. So you have a number of short conversations around that theme. Mirrors is a short bracketed section which kind of talks about the mirror as a really interesting tool to see oneself, but also see inside oneself. A really interesting conversation with that person. Hair, there's a interesting kind of comparison between someone from from the Black community and someone from the Hasidic community, and their interactions with how they experience their hair and how it represents a part of their community and their identity. There's a section called Race, which features a conversation with Angela Davis and kind of goes into the history, the racial history of America, especially around Black communities. There is Rhythm and Poetry, which is a section that talks about the way that rhythm and music and rap and poetry play a part of an identifier of their community. 7 Verses is starting to kind of build towards what is going to be the final chapter. You have a number of conversations with people like Leonard Jeffries, who was involved with the production of Roots, so you have all of these kind of stories building towards an awareness for the theatrical, the folks who are there for the night, the audience, of the underlying issues that are happening around the events of Crown Heights. Then we hit Crown Heights, Brooklyn, August 1991. And that is around half of this play. Our conversations with a number of people who were there on the night itself, people who were there in the aftermath, some people who we've been introduced to already. We get another scene. We've had a scene with Reverend Al Sharpton. He comes back again. You have conversations with chaplains who are at the hospital, people who just happen to be there, all sorts of folks, and then the aftermath as well of like the Australian man's brother is back in town, and he comes and he's crying out for justice. So you have all sorts of folks interacting. It ends with a pretty powerful conversation with Carmel Cato, the boy's father, Gavin Cato's father, really powerful. It winds up being a monologue, but must have been just an interview conversation with him, which he says straight up, use all of my words for this. Just kind of gives there's always a question when you're doing verbatim theater, oral history or anything like that, where it's like, I wonder how much they knew this was going to show up in this way in the play. And that's such a powerful way to end the play, both with his verbal permission to tell everything that he has said, and also just the way his account of that evening was. It's a powerful statement at the end of the play. That's kind of where I'm going to end the synopsis. There's so much more going on, and I'm excited to get to kind of dive into parts of it in our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, sort of by definition, this is not a plot play. This is not a narrative play, really, even in any traditional sense. The play is really pitched as or advertised as this sort of journalistic verbatim documentary theater. Anna Deavere Smith is always very careful not to call herself a journalist, but that phrase is used about her a lot. But it's described as this thing, right, that looks at the Crown Heights riots. What happened? Why did they happen? Who were involved? But it's fascinating that the first half, maybe 40%, maybe not quite half, is not about the Crown Heights riots at all. I mean, doesn't even mention them. I'm not even sure Crown Heights appears, other than there's one little one where there's some kind of demographic information about the neighborhood. But there's interviews with people who definitely do not live in Crown Heights in that section. I mean, it's much more. If I were making a 2-act version of this play, if I were just going to restructure it, not move anything around, but just sort of relabel stuff, like I might call Act 1 Identity and Act 2 the Crown Heights Riots, although she subdivides it even further into these titled sections, as you said.
Yeah, and each of those sections are kind of adding another facet, another pane of glass to the stained glass window. However you want to, to envision what's going on in this first one. It's providing the backdrop for what follows, especially for, imagining an audience arriving here not having experienced much of this, or an audience arriving here and having experienced much of it, perhaps not have experienced half of it, which is a really interesting way to think of this play, because this play, I mean, we're talking about this play over 30 years after it premiered. So an audience walking into it maybe may remember events of that particular situation, but maybe they don't. The audience that walked into it for the first time likely did have some knowledge of the situation, but perhaps not all the facets that are presented in this first identities, etc. section of the play.
There's a really, really great example of that, and it might be my favorite monologue in the play, just for how specific and interesting it is. It's very early in the play, and it's an interview with a Hasidic woman who is sort of at home. We'll maybe talk about how Anna Deavere Smith structures each of these interviews, but for now, set that aside. Basically the interview is this story, again, not a story of the Crown Heights riots at all, nothing to do with that, just an everyday life story. And the story is basically about how, based on the particular religious sort of rules, and rules is not the word I want. I want a much more respectful word than that I can't grab at right now. But just on the customs, the beliefs, the followings of this particular group, at certain times, under certain time parameters, these folks cannot do really any work at all. And in this case, that even includes turning on and off electric devices. Now, children under 3 are exempt from that because they, I suppose there's some sort of indication of their self-control, their understanding of the Torah, all that, blah, blah. So this woman describes how they were in the middle of this time, and their 3-year-old, sort of by accident, just messing around, turns on the radio really loud. Now, they can't turn it off because it's against the religious customs for them to turn on or off electric devices during this period. And it's starting to just drain everybody. It's loud, it's blaring. They can't sort of trick the 3-year-old into getting it turned back off. So this woman describes just going out into the street and finding a young black person. And because she knew, although you can be black and Jewish, he wasn't dressed in the traditional Hasidic garb that would have identified him as Jewish. So she says, I was pretty sure he was both black and not dressed in a Hasidic garb. So I was pretty sure he wasn't Jewish. So I went up to him and I said, hey, she can't ask him for help, is the particular stricture of this situation. And again, it's incredible specific. So she just sort of says, my radio in my apartment, it won't turn off. It really stinks. And this black guy's like, oh, okay. And they go back up to their apartment. And again, she's trying not to ask for help. And eventually he's like, the power button's right here, and turns it off and leaves. And she's like, I am sure that he went back to his friends and talked about how stupid Jewish people are. They don't even understand how to work their own radios. And I mean, that interview is just so good. Not only does it show you, does it give this portrait of a culture that's, at least for me, totally different than how I live my life. So there's the sort of empathy created by specificity. But then you also get a little picture of how ignorance and misunderstanding create division. Right? If she's right that this person goes back and goes these Jewish families, they don't even know how to operate their radios, just because there's a gap in understanding between cultures, and you can see her lay the seeds for how that gap grows and grows until it becomes violent.
Yeah. So that's just a perfect. I'm going to try to unpack this because I feel like there's so many layers of it in my head. That's just a perfect example of trying to expose people to another culture and the kind of living right next door to a whole other universe of experience that many of us go through. And also it's such an exemplar, we use that word at the start of the show, of what this kind of theater does, because it's not journalism. It's not, you're not just in there looking for the facts of this day. It's kind of got, I do part-time chaplaincy work, and it's an interesting sort of comparison to that, of a really compassionate engaging with someone, letting them tell fully their story. I don't know exactly how these interviews work, but I imagine the introduction of my script has a great story from Anna Deavere Smith about trying to teach her students how to go do these sort of collecting of verbatim oral histories from folks. And she has had a student who went, and she said, unfortunately, the student wound up just telling the person they were supposed to be interviewing all about her life and the things that were going on, instead of collecting and trying to be as present to this person and learning about this person so that they can represent them as truly as possible. And so eventually Anna Deavere Smith says, so I started doing it more often myself. And so the way that this particular type of theater encourages the artist to go have a compassionate listening conversation with someone, learn something about their life, and not just the way like a chaplain would to kind of listen and help them process their own story, but then takes that story and brings it in the most compassionate way, or I think compassionate way is the way I want to say that, represents that person in such a compassionate way so that their story is told to people who would never have had the chance to go into that person's living room and hear that story for themselves, is such an awesome part of this kind of theater that makes it different from the work of journalism, different from the work of like a chaplain, different from so many ways that we get stories of other people's lives. It provides a really awesome verbatim compassionate way to engage with someone who you may never ever have the chance to meet.
Absolutely. And that like sort of compassionate specificity really plays out in how she's constructed the script. Before each of the scenes, I guess you'd call them, or the monologues or the interviews, whatever. I mean, again, they're presented all as monologues. And there's this weird theatrical thing. This was not the point I was going to make, but I just think it's cool. Because, of course, she's the one who conducted almost all these interviews. So in the scene, like in the theatrical thing that she created when it was her doing it, she is playing the person that she is interviewing in the scene, right? So there's like her as the person, but then there's also like an imaginary her in the scene, because all of these people, well, maybe not every single one, but the generally the people that are giving these monologues, these characters, are aware of it as an interview. They talk to this person who has clearly asked them a question. They reference the person. Occasionally there's sort of gaps where another question is asked in our imagination. So that, I mean, the fact of the interview is very present. And so then, if you think about Anna Deavere Smith herself doing it, it's like she's herself as the interviewer in our imaginations, but then she herself is the person being interviewed right there on stage. I mean, it's like, whoa. Talk about just like layers of meta-ness.
Yeah. The way that it comes off, at least so I watched a little bit of the PBS production, I'll say, of this play, and the interestingness of that, what you're talking about, this sort of like super meta thing that's happening, at least in that model, as you're watching it, because she's looking right into the camera, and I imagine on stage is looking right at the audience. You have this sort of sense that you are the interviewer,
which means you're her. That's right, because that's the next level. Because I kept saying she is there herself in our imaginations, but that's not quite right, is it? We're her. Yeah. We become Anna Deavere Smith so that Anna Deavere Smith can become another person. I mean, it's just like, what in the world? Just crazy cool. Yeah. So anyway, back to the point I was making about how the scenes are structured. So before each of these scenes, interviews, monologues, whatever, there is a little stage direction, of course. And what I love about them in this particular version of the script, this was not the case as consistently in House Arrest, but House Arrest also had a lot of like historical documents and stuff different than this play. The little stage direction is literally just a description of the event of the interview. Now, and there's a couple of them where she says like, this was an interview, but I turned it into a speech, or this was a speech that I was there or saw the video of, but almost across the board. It's really just a description of the interview itself, not like the sort of theatrical thing that happens later. There's a specificity, a pointing towards the actual event. Here's an example from late in the play, an interview with Henry Rice called Knew How to Use Certain Words. This is what's at the top. Thursday, November 21st, 1991. The Jackson Hole restaurant on Lexington in the 30s in Manhattan. Lunchtime, dimly lit, a reddish haze on everything. I'm going to skip around a little bit. Mr. Rice, very neatly dressed, is eating a large, messy hamburger and horizontally chopped pickles. I mean, look at this. Listen to that. Horizontally chopped pickles. Why does he include that? That's crazy. It's awesome. Drinking a Miller Lite, beer in bottle next to a red plastic glass. He's wearing a baseball cap. Moving on, and blah, blah, blah. Heavy New Timberland boots, blah, blah, blah. He's struggling to eat without making a mess of the food. At some point, sits up from food and has his right-hander fist on his hip. I mean, what a detail. Right-hander fist on his hip. A very unaffected but truly authoritative stance. Good-natured, handsome, healthy. I mean, it's like there are these things that she says, look at this. Look at this specific. Look at the little detail. The horizontally chopped pickles are for some reason included in this script.
Yeah, it really grounds. I don't know. I feel like not often, but sometimes, especially in scripts of a certain age. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you, Eugene O'Neill. There are somewhat overbearing whole novels written as a character enters the stage. And those sorts of instances, I often feel the playwright as this sort of overbearing force that kind of is showing their hand a little bit more than perhaps they ought to. However, in this is not my experience of this particular paragraph. This feels like such a welcoming into such a move towards hospitality towards whatever actor may play this someday, and also a really again compassionate posture that this interviewer has had towards this person. They've noticed some really specific things about them. They've noticed their posture. They notice how they like to eat. They notice how they like to drink, even though there's an empty glass next to their beer bottle. They've noticed all these really particular things about it, and not only is that an honoring of the original interviewee, but that's also a welcoming to the future artist trying to represent this person as honestly as they can, to step into that particular, not just that particular person, of course, but the cut pickles is that particular place. Imagine that particular place, that day, and try to worm your way into that moment as best as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's not just that she just, puts this in some notes at the back of the script about each person. They are included in the script in a way in which they are given authority. The particular and the specific is inserted, and I think that the way that they are inserted as a kind of stage direction for each interview demands that you, as the producing artist, listen and pay attention to the particulars there as well.
Yeah, as you ought to do, and not to get too far. We've already been on the oral history soapbox a little bit, but that's what oral history is about. You're supposed to pay attention to the specifics. You're supposed to give as much of an earnest representation of the person as possible, even though you are not the person.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at some other examples of kind of verbatim theater oral history across no script. We often talk about one of the, in terms of the actual writing that's being done. Of course, these are excerpts, so she's not writing the words. It's more of a collage, assemblage, arrangement, if you're going to use a musical term, right? And one of the tools that these artists have in this way, maybe even one of the most powerful tools they have, is the tool of juxtaposition, right? They take interviews, excerpts, monologues, however you want to describe them, that did not happen near each other, next to each other, one after the other, that had nothing to do with each other in space and time, and put them next to each other on stage. So one of the it's a little more heavy-handed example, but it makes the point best, I think. There was a lot more subtlety in how she does it across the play. But there are two monologues back to back. Two interviews, again, whatever you want to call them. One is with Minister Conrad, and it is a absolutely gut-wrenching depiction of the violence and brutality and lasting impact of slavery in America. The rape, the torture, the disidentification that was done to Black people across centuries of human history. and it's tough to read. I can't imagine performing it. Obviously I never would because of my skin color, but I also can't imagine seeing it performed. I mean, it is tough stuff about slavery. It's frank, it's in your face, it's important, but it's tough. And it is followed right up with someone whose name I'm probably not going to be able to say exactly right. I apologize. Letty Cotton Pogrebin, who it tells the story of her uncle. It seems to me that it's framed as if the story is published in a book somewhere and that this person is reading just directly from the book of their uncle who escaped the Holocaust. And they describe how their uncle, because he looked Aryan, was sort of nominated by the village as the designated survivor and given this very important task from this Jewish community. You must survive at all costs because somebody has to tell these stories, and it's going to have to be you because you at least look like you're Aryan. We can forge some papers and maybe get you out of here. But listen, you have to survive no matter what, because it has to be you. There's no one else. And so in order to do that, and this is going to be terrible. I'm sorry for those of you who are going to be shocked by this, but it is shocking.
Worth it to do. Quick content warning. This story has to do with the Holocaust and this particular person's route to survive it. So if that doesn't sound like something you want to hear, go ahead and jump forward about a minute.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. It's tough. So the Nazis apparently, I'm just repeating the story, suspect that his papers proving his Aryan descent, again, which are false, they suspect that they're false. And so they ask him to prove his loyalty to the German nation by forcing Jewish people into gas chambers at one of the death camps. And the way the story is told, among those people that he ends up having to participate in their murder are his family. But this idea that he had to survive to carry this message to American Jews by escaping Nazi Germany was so important can you imagine the trauma and the pain and how awful that would be? And so both those are terrible, awful parts of human history. They are stories of what the awful violence and cruelty of one human to another can be. And again, the two interviews in real life, nothing to do with each other in space and time. But Anna Deavere Smith puts them one after another, one on stage and then the other. And you can see, I think it's that, again, that's one of the more heavy-handed ones. So that one's a little more obvious what she's doing by juxtaposing those together.
Yeah, absolutely. Putting them side by side, especially, two stories from the two communities that are involved in this particular story. And you see the different facets of where they're coming from. You also see the real pain that they're both coming from. Because you see this stuff again, not to draw more comparisons, but you see it from like a journalistic perspective, or maybe if you saw this on the news when it happened, you see the event. You see just the outcomes, the thing that happened that night, the two things that happened that night. And you don't often, though I'm sure some journalistic people who do their due diligence would try to do this, you don't often get to go below the surface and see what has been happening, what has already happened, what is churning below the surface that brought about these events. And it tells so much more of the story. And this does that. This does tell so much more of the story. And subsequently, when you get to the actual event in this play, it continues to do just that. It kind of like lays out, just like presents more for you to look at. At least in my reading of it, it does a very good job of just like laying it out and letting you make conclusions or just experience.
Because this is one of those plays. The way that Anna Deavere Smith tells the story of the Crown Heights riots, I think is part of what makes why she is careful about the word journalism. Because she has not taken in a bunch of different narratives and then produced her best understanding of the facts. Now, I also have not studied journalism or the philosophy of journalism, so if I'm misrepresenting the philosophy of journalism, I apologize. But there is no attempt to present a narrative of what happened. Instead, Anna Deavere Smith is presenting many narratives of what happened. I mean, across the Crown Heights section, which again is probably the back 60 to 50%, there are so many different accounts of the individual events of, especially around the two murders. We don't go a ton into the riots, just a little bit, but especially around the day of the accident and then the subsequent murder. I said that wrong. It's not two murders, the accident and then the subsequent murder. You know, I couldn't tell you what happened for real. I mean, I know that some people died, but I don't exactly. I mean, there are people who think the driver was drunk. There are people who think, well, it's because this caravan speeds through the city because his life is in such danger that you get into these sort of dangerous situations. There are people who think there were already city ambulances there treating the black children who were hit. So when the Hasidic ambulance, they apparently had a privately run ambulance, showed up and treated the Hasidic people, although that became an inflammatory point of the riot, that actually it's not the story that people think it is, because there were city ambulances there treating the kids already. And there are people who say that's definitely not true. I don't know who told you that. I was there. There were no other. I mean, so you don't know. And there's no even attempt to say, this is what I think happens from Anna Deavere Smith. Instead, the journey is, look at how identity and environment shape perception of these events.
Yeah, and look at less the event, but more the 15 people in that particular section who experienced that event, and how they identify, how they've kind of existed previous to that event affected how they saw it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You get to the end and you're like, there's no like, that you don't watch a video or something like that. You don't like see any like facts. You get a subjective account of people who were there. And yeah, it introduces you to the people more so than the event.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly the philosophy or the art theory behind this, right? Is like, here are the humans and their specific circumstances, their specific perspectives. Make of it what you will. And in some ways, Anna Deavere Smith hands us the problem that the community of New York City was handed. Like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what do we do with I wasn't there. How do I know what happened? I don't have this, my family history doesn't contain these moments of incredible violence and trauma that you're describing. I haven't lived in this contentious relationship in this community forever. I wasn't there in the day. I don't know if the guy was drunk or not drunk, or if the kids were playing in a certain way or not playing in a certain way. I didn't see the murder of this innocent Hasidic man. I mean, what do I do now that I've been handed all of this to try to hold at once?
Yeah, and yeah, how do you hold it together? How do you listen to each other's stories? And how do you do it without responding back? Again, as the audience being Anna Deavere Smith interviewing, how do you just hold the story that someone's telling you? and then in this case, move on to the next person's story. But how do you just hold that story? Don't add your perspective into it. Don't respond back with something that it makes you think of. You're just there to hear the other person's story. And that sort of posture is a really unique one in our way that we have conversations as humans, at least now. It's an awesome experience to get to be a part of, in terms of how theater can prompt that sort of listening and that sort of conversation.
Yeah, I think we're probably out of time for today, but that's a good note to end on. The way that art and theater can prompt listening as the kind of core of this script. I think that's so true. Anna Deavere Smith has made this particular vein of theater what it is. All credit to her. It's incredible what she's done. This is an incredible script. If you haven't read it, check it out. It reads pretty well, but also try to watch the American Playhouse recording of her performances. It is so incredible what she can do as an actor.
It is awesome. It is wild. Definitely check in with that and watch it. It'll cover a lot of the stuff that we couldn't get into in this show, which is how an actor chooses to embody these truisms about the interviewee. It's on full display in that production. So definitely check it out. Definitely read the play. And when you do, we'd love to keep chatting about this play with you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the username @NoScriptPodcast. hit those sites first, have the conversations there, because what we're hoping that does is give you a chance to chat with people who have read the play, for sure we have, but also to kind of extend the conversation out to the broader community around people who read plays, interact with plays, and want to talk about them with folks. So find us on all those social media sites. We also have a Gmail, noscriptpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on any of those platforms. We'd love to keep talking about this play with you.
Absolutely. If you liked this conversation or any of our other conversations across our nearly completed season 10 or any of the other 9 seasons, check them out. I know we're almost there. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube. You can like us on Facebook and get a link every Monday there as well. Just pass us on. See who in your life would like this podcast. It'd be a great help to us just to recommend us to your family or friends. Thank you all so much for another great episode, for another great conversation. I will not be around next week as Jackson is joined by his partner Hannah for a conversation. We'll see ya then.
Yes, indeed. Until then, I'm Jackson Nikolai.
I'm Jacob Mann Christensen. Thanks for joining us for No Script, the podcast.